The fire tower was locked from the inside. That was the detail no one could explain. In October of 2019, a woman vanished while hiking alone in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. For 5 days, search teams believed the wilderness had claimed another name, another case destined to end with a memorial plaque and unanswered questions. Then a ranger climbed a decommissioned fire lookout that hadn't been staffed in decades. Inside, they found her alive, and the door behind her was bolted shut. Megan Holloway was 32 years old, an experienced solo hiker with a reputation for careful planning and restraint. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't chasing danger. Her friends described her as methodical to the point of caution, someone who logged routes, checked weather patterns obsessively, and never deviated from her plan without notifying someone. Her plan was simple. A 2-day hike through a well-documented section of the San Juans, one overnight camp, clear trails. Early October meant cold nights, but nothing extreme. She packed accordingly, extra layers, emergency rations, satellite beacon. On the morning of October 11th, Megan signed the trail register at a remote but maintained trailhead. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. She listed her intended route and return time. October 13th, noon. That was the last official record of her movement. The first night passed without concern. Megan's satellite beacon remained inactive, which was expected. She had told friends she would only use it in an emergency. There was no cell coverage in the area. By the second evening, concern crept in. By morning, it became panic. When Megan failed to return by noon on October 13th, park authorities were notified. Search and rescue mobilized quickly. This was not a high-risk disappearance yet, but the weather was turning. Snow was coming. Search teams followed her planned route first. They found her campsite intact, tent standing, sleeping bag packed, food untouched. It looked as if she had never stayed the night at all. There were no signs of struggle, no damaged equipment, no animal activity, just a campsite prepared and abandoned with intention. As the search expanded, helicopters scanned ridgelines and valleys. Ground teams combed forests and ravines. Thermal imaging picked up nothing human, only deer and the lingering heat of sun-warmed rock. On the third day, a ranger made an observation that shifted the tone of the operation. Megan's boot prints stopped. Not at a cliff edge. Not at a river crossing. Not at a dangerous slope. They stopped in the middle of the trail, as if she had simply stepped out of the pattern of the world. 5 days after her disappearance, as snow began dusting the upper elevations, a veteran ranger suggested checking an old structure few people remembered existed. A fire tower, decommissioned, boarded up, listed as inaccessible on all maps. It sat on a ridgeline nearly 3 miles from Megan's last known position. When the ranger reached it, the ladder was intact. The windows were dark. The door, heavy steel, reinforced decades earlier, was closed and locked from the inside. When they forced it open, they found Megan Holloway sitting on the floor, wrapped in a blanket that did not belong to her. She was alive, dehydrated, disoriented, terrified, and she kept repeating the same sentence over and over, long before anyone asked her a question. I didn't climb up here to hide. I climbed up here because they told me it was the only place I could still be seen. Megan Holloway did not recognize the men who carried her down from the tower. She watched them carefully, eyes darting from face to face, as if searching for something just out of alignment. When a medic offered her water, she hesitated, then took the bottle only after it was set on the ground and stepped away from. The first words she spoke that made sense came nearly an hour later, inside the warmth of a rescue tent. I didn't lose time, she said quietly. Time lost me. Doctors documented acute dehydration, hypothermia, and exhaustion, but nothing that explained how she had survived 5 days in freezing conditions without food, heat, or a functioning shelter. The blanket wrapped around her was military-grade, synthetic, insulated, and completely dry. No record showed it had ever been stored in the tower. When investigators asked Megan how she reached the fire lookout, her answer immediately raised concern. "I followed the breaks," she said. Pressed to explain, she shook her head, frustrated, not confused. "They weren't paths," she clarified. "They were places where the forest didn't finish itself." Megan said the first day of her hike went exactly as planned. She reached her intended campsite by late afternoon and began setting up before sunset. That was when the sounds stopped. No wind, no insects, no distant birds. The silence didn't feel natural, it felt selective. She remembered standing still, waiting for something, anything, to return. That was when she noticed movement between the trees, not approaching, not retreating, but repositioning. "They weren't stepping," she said, "they were correcting." Megan abandoned her campsite before nightfall, not out of panic, but because she felt certain that staying meant becoming fixed in place. She couldn't explain how she knew, only that the idea of stopping felt dangerous. As she moved uphill, she began seeing shapes that didn't resolve fully. Not shadows, not people, gaps, areas where her eyes refused to focus, no matter how hard she tried. She tried to activate her satellite beacon. It didn't respond. Instead, the device vibrated in short, rhythmic pulses, as if acknowledging her presence without sending a signal. By the second night, Megan realized she was no longer navigating by terrain. She was navigating by permission. Certain areas felt passable. Others triggered an immediate sense of wrongness, pressure in her ears, nausea, the instinct to step back without understanding why. That was when she heard the voice. Not loud, not close. Overhead. Up is where the shape still holds, it said. Megan insisted the voice was not hallucinated. It did not sound like speech traveling through air. It sounded like thought given direction. She followed it because the alternative felt worse. The fire tower appeared suddenly through the trees, as if it had been waiting for her to notice it. The ladder was intact, the structure solid. And the door was open. Inside, the tower felt finished. Complete. The silence broke there, not with sound, but with absence. Megan said it was the first place since her disappearance where she felt fully contained. When she closed the door behind her, the lock slid into place on its own. She did not try to open it. "I knew it would only open again when it was allowed to," she said. Investigators asked the obvious question. Who locked the door? Megan's answer came without hesitation. "No one," she said. "The tower just stopped being open." She spent the next days sitting on the floor, wrapped in the blanket that had already been there when she arrived. She did not sleep in a normal sense. She drifted, waking whenever the light shifted. Sometimes she could hear footsteps on the stairs. They never reached the door. "They were checking the edges," she whispered, "making sure I stayed where the world still knew how to be me." When asked why she believed she was still alive, Megan looked up for the first time since the interview began. "Because the tower could still see me," she said, "and whatever was out there needed something it couldn't finish." She went silent after that. And for the first time since the rescue began, investigators understood something deeply unsettling. Megan Holloway hadn't been lost. She had been contained. Megan Holloway did not sleep after her rescue. Doctors noted that she closed her eyes, her breathing slowed, her body rested, but the neurological patterns of sleep never appeared. Instead, her brain activity showed long, sustained periods of alertness, punctuated by brief drops that resembled listening rather than dreaming. When asked what happened during those hours, Megan gave an answer no one knew how to record. "I was staying in the shape," she said, If I stopped paying attention, it would forget where to put me back. Investigators began examining the fire tower itself. The structure was officially listed as decommissioned in the late 1980s, its access ladder supposedly removed decades ago. That claim was immediately disproven. The ladder was not only intact, it showed recent wear. Mud transfers on the rungs matched soil from the trail where Megan's footprints had vanished. She had climbed it. But that was the least disturbing discovery. Inside the tower, forensic teams found evidence of repeated occupancy, not just from Megan, but long before her. The floorboards bore shallow impressions, not deep enough to be footprints, but consistent with weight being applied repeatedly in the same locations. Always near the windows. Always facing outward. The dust patterns showed it clearly. Something or someone had stood there for long periods, unmoving, looking out over the forest. Not packing. Not resting. Watching. The blanket Megan had used was not military surplus, as initially assumed. Its fibers matched a type issued to forestry services in the early 1970s. Records showed several such blankets were logged as missing over the years, their disappearance never investigated. Megan had not brought the blanket with her. The tower had kept it. When asked why she never tried to break the window or force the door, Megan looked genuinely confused. "Why would I leave the only place that remembered me?" she asked. That question forced investigators to re-examine the area's history. Over the next week, archival records were pulled, old ranger journals, incident logs, handwritten maintenance reports. What emerged was not a pattern of disaster, but of omission. Hikers who felt disoriented near the ridge. Fire watch volunteers who abandoned shifts early, citing unease. Radio logs noting unexplained signal delays near the tower. And one entry, dated 1974, written in a ranger's shaky handwriting. Stayed in tower past dark, heard movement below, didn't answer. Lock engaged on its own, waited until morning. No follow-up. No explanation. The tower had done this before. Megan's recollection of her missing time remained fragmented, but certain details were consistent. She described moments where the forest appeared incomplete, trees that didn't cast shadows correctly, ground that felt firm but resisted pressure. Like the place was loading, she said, apologetic for the word choice, like it hadn't decided what it was yet. She believed the tower functioned as a reference point, a fixed structure in an environment that otherwise shifted subtly when unobserved. It wasn't protection in a human sense. It was stability. The tower didn't keep things out. It kept definitions in. That theory gained credibility when a survey team attempted to revisit the ridge under controlled conditions. The moment they moved away from the tower's immediate vicinity, instruments began to drift. Distance readings fluctuated. Sound behaved incorrectly, voices arriving too quickly, echoes collapsing inward instead of dispersing. When one technician joked that the place felt unfinished, Megan, listening from the command tent, reacted violently. "Don't say that," she shouted. "That's how it notices gaps." The visit was terminated immediately. Back at the hospital, Megan was asked the question everyone avoided. What happened to the others? She didn't answer right away. Then she said something that forced the room into silence. "I wasn't alone out there," she said. "I was just the only one who found something that still knew what it was for." When pressed, she clarified. "There were people who didn't make it to the tower. I don't think they died." She swallowed. "I think they were used to fix places that didn't work anymore." Megan was released from the hospital 2 weeks later under strict confidentiality agreements. The official explanation remained exposure-induced dissociation combined with survival stress. Unofficially, the fire tower was removed from all maps. Not marked as closed. Not marked at all. Because some structures, investigators realized, are not meant to be found again. They are meant to stay where the world can still remember itself. Megan Holloway left the mountains, but the mountains did not leave her. In the weeks after her release, she stayed with her sister in Durango under the quiet supervision of federal agents who never identified themselves by agency. They were polite, careful. They asked fewer questions than expected, as if afraid of learning answers they could not contain. At first, Megan appeared to improve. She slept in short intervals. She ate regularly. She spoke in full sentences without drifting. Doctors noted progress and began discussing trauma therapy, reintegration, normalcy. Then the house began to change. Not dramatically, not visibly, subtly. Megan rearranged furniture without realizing it. Chairs migrated toward walls. Tables shifted slightly off-center. Objects that once sat neatly began to align at shallow angles, never square, never symmetrical. When her sister moved them back, Megan became distressed. "You're closing it," she said once, near tears. "It needs room to remember." At night, Megan avoided mirrors. She covered reflective surfaces with towels and sheets. When asked why, she gave a simple answer. "Reflections tell it where edges are," she said. "If it learns them too well, it won't need us anymore." That sentence made its way into an internal memo that circulated briefly before being buried. The first confirmed anomaly occurred 11 days after Megan returned. A neighbor reported seeing a woman standing in the backyard just before dawn, barefoot, facing the tree line, unmoving. When police arrived, no one was there, but the grass showed flattened areas, long and shallow, radiating outward from a single point. Pressure marks, identical to those documented in the fire tower. Megan denied leaving the house that night. Medical logs confirmed she had been asleep. But she didn't seem surprised. "It's not me," she said quietly when shown photographs. "It's what learned where I was." Investigators expanded their scope. They quietly reviewed other cases, hikers found alive after days of disappearance, individuals who returned altered but functional, people who insisted they had been kept rather than rescued. The overlap was disturbing. Each survivor had encountered a fixed structure, a ranger station, an abandoned mine entrance, a survey marker, a concrete culvert beneath a road, places with purpose, places that once defined something clearly. Places that could still hold shape. Megan was asked if she believed the fire tower had saved her. She shook her head. "It didn't save me," she said. "It stopped me from being corrected." As winter approached, Megan's condition worsened. She began hearing the voice again, not overhead this time, but closer, inside walls, beneath floors, not speaking in commands, but in observations. Still aligned, still visible, still useful. She learned to answer carefully. Short replies, neutral words. When she didn't respond, the house grew quiet in a way that felt intentional. One night, agents monitoring the property recorded a thermal anomaly near the back of the house, a brief cold bloom that did not match weather conditions. It lingered for 37 seconds. Megan sat upright in bed and whispered, "It followed the wrong outline." The anomaly vanished. By December, a decision was made. Megan Holloway would be relocated. Not for her safety, for everyone else. Before she left, she asked for one thing, to return to the fire tower one last time. The request was denied. Megan did not argue. "They don't need me there anymore," she said. "They know where it is." That night, she packed her belongings with precise care. She left behind anything reflective, anything symmetrical, anything that closed too completely. At dawn, as the transport vehicle waited, Megan paused in the doorway and looked back at the house. "It will forget this place," she said softly. "That's good. It means it didn't need to practice here." The agents didn't ask what she meant. They drove away in silence. Behind them, the house stood unchanged. But somewhere in the San Juan Mountains, the fire tower waited, still locked, still watching, still holding its shape. And whatever had learned to use, it had not forgotten. Megan Holloway was moved 3 times in 4 months. Each relocation followed the same pattern. A quiet transfer, a temporary sense of calm, then subtle instability. It wasn't that things happened around her. It was that things began to line up. In her second safe house, a converted duplex outside of Grand Junction, agents noticed that Megan always chose the same seat at the kitchen table, one that left her slightly misaligned with the room. When asked why, she hesitated, then answered carefully. "This way the corners don't agree with each other," she said. "It slows them down." She spent hours drawing, though she insisted she wasn't making pictures. What she produced looked like unfinished maps, partial lines, angles that suggested routes but never completed them. She refused to let anyone photograph the pages. "If you finish them," she warned, "they'll know where they're allowed to go." Despite that, analysts began noticing a disturbing coincidence. Every place Megan had been moved to fell along a loose geographic pattern, northwest to southeast, following old fire roads, decommissioned rail lines, and survey boundaries, routes designed long ago to impose order on wilderness. No one admitted it aloud, but the implication was obvious. She wasn't being relocated. She was being traced. The first undeniable breach occurred in February. A highway maintenance crew reported finding a locked service shed open at dawn. Inside, tools had been rearranged, not stolen, not damaged, but placed into long linear groupings that made no functional sense. The ground outside the shed showed shallow impressions, parallel and precise, leading away toward the tree line. When Megan was informed, she closed her eyes. "It's testing buildings now," she said, "places that remember being useful." She was asked how she knew. "Because it doesn't ask anymore," she replied. "It assumes." That assumption proved dangerous. In early March, a volunteer search and rescue worker went missing overnight while camping alone near a boundary zone Megan had sketched weeks earlier. His campsite was found intact, his vehicle untouched. He was discovered the next afternoon inside an abandoned weather station, dehydrated but alive. The door had been locked from the inside. He couldn't explain how he got there. He remembered only one thing clearly, the sense that staying outside would have caused him to lose his outline. When shown a photograph of the fire tower, he reacted violently. "That one works better," he said. "It's taller." The case never made the news. Back at the safe house, Megan stopped drawing altogether. Instead, she began standing still for long periods, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. Monitors recorded no sleep, no dissociation, just prolonged awareness. "She's listening," one agent said quietly. And she was. One night, Megan spoke without being prompted. "They're connecting the fixed points," she said. "Once there are enough, they won't need places like me anymore." When asked what would happen then, she took a long time to answer. "They won't need permission," she said. "They'll know where the edges are everywhere." The next morning, the agents found something outside the house. In the frost-covered ground, just beyond the back fence, were faint impressions forming a rough outline, not of a person, but of a structure. A shape that mirrored the dimensions of the fire tower, flattened and incomplete, as if something were trying to remember it from memory alone. Megan knelt beside it, careful not to step inside the shape. "It's getting close," she whispered, "but it still doesn't understand doors." That was the moment the operation changed. Megan Holloway was no longer considered a survivor. She was considered a reference point. And the thing that had learned to use the fire tower was learning faster than anyone had planned for. The fire tower was not supposed to open. It had been sealed again after Megan Holloway's rescue, steel door reinforced, ladder removed, access trail erased from maintenance schedules. On paper, the structure no longer existed. In reality, it had been waiting. The first sign came in late March, when a weather satellite recorded a brief anomaly over the San Juan ridgeline. Not a storm, not a temperature shift, a distortion like a momentary hesitation in atmospheric data, as if the air itself had failed to resolve. At the exact same time, 3 separate monitoring stations lost signal for 22 seconds. No alarms triggered. No errors logged. Just absence. Megan woke from her chair and stood upright for the first time in days. It remembered, she said, but it remembered wrong. Agents rushed to the room. Megan was calm, almost relieved. The tower didn't open because someone went to it, she explained. It opened because something tried to use it without asking. By dawn, confirmation arrived. A ranger performing an aerial wildlife survey reported seeing the fire tower ladder in place again. Not reattached. Present. It hadn't been there the day before. Ground teams were deployed under the cover of a routine infrastructure check. When they reached the ridgeline, the scene defied explanation. The ladder was not bolted or welded. It was resting against the tower exactly as it had decades earlier, angled with perfect balance, as if gravity itself had decided that was where it belonged. The door was closed, unlocked. Inside, the tower was empty. No footprints, no debris, no signs of forced entry. But the floorboards told a different story. Fresh pressure marks, elongated, evenly spaced, radiated outward from the center of the room toward every window. They did not match human gait. They suggested something had stood there for a long time, redistributing weight as if testing viewpoints. The tower had been used. When Megan was told, she closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. It thinks the tower is a rule, she said, but the tower was only ever a reminder. She explained what she meant that afternoon, speaking carefully, choosing each word, as if the act of namming carried risk. The structures, the tower, the weather station, the locked sheds, were not prisons or shelters. They were anchors, human-made shapes that told the surrounding world how to behave. Straight lines, clear edges, defined purpose. The thing in the forest did not understand those concepts naturally. It learned them by observing how people moved around them. By using the tower without permission, it had made a mistake. It didn't know when to stop, Megan said. That's why it left marks. The marks, investigators learned, were appearing again. This time not near Megan. Near other fixed places. A closed schoolhouse in a mountain town. An abandoned lookout on a different ridge. A concrete dam spillway that had been dry for years. All showed the same signs: shallow impressions, misaligned angles, doors found unlocked from the inside. The pattern was spreading. Containment protocols escalated quietly. Areas were closed for structural inspection. Residents were relocated under the excuse of seasonal hazards. The fire tower itself was scheduled for demolition. Megan was informed of the plan. She did not protest. "You can't destroy it," she said. "It already knows what it was." When asked what would happen if the tower were removed, she gave the answer no one wanted. "It won't lose the shape," she said. "It will stop needing the reference." That night, Megan did something she hadn't done since her rescue. She slept for exactly 3 hours. When she woke, she was shaking. "They're done practicing," she whispered. "Now they're comparing." Outside, beyond the safe house, the mountains stood silent and unchanged. But somewhere along a ridgeline, a door that had once been locked from the inside had learned how to be open. And the thing that learned from it was no longer asking where it was allowed to stand. After the tower reopened, the San Juans stopped behaving like mountains. Not visibly, not dramatically, but predictably. Distances began to fail in small, deniable ways. Rangers reported trails that took longer to traverse in one direction than the other. Survey markers appeared slightly displaced, never enough to alarm, always enough to unsettle. Radio transmissions lagged, arriving a breath later than expected, as if the sound had to pass through something first. Megan Holloway noticed before anyone else. "It's comparing," she said. "It's checking which shapes hold and which ones blur." She was no longer frightened. That frightened the people around her. In early April, a climber went missing near a closed ridgeline 20 miles from the original fire tower. His car was found at the trailhead. His gear was staged neatly beside it, as if prepared for later use. He was found the next morning, alive, standing inside a locked pump house used decades earlier to service a mining operation. The door was bolted from the inside. The windows were intact. He could not explain how he got there. He said only that the cold outside had begun to press him flat, and that the pump house felt like the last place where his body still knew how to exist. Investigators stopped calling these incidents rescues. They called them returns. A classified review revealed something worse. The returned individuals, Megan included, were changing less over time, not more. The symptoms stabilized, then flattened, as if they had reached a final configuration. But the places they passed through did not. Every return left subtle alterations behind, doors that closed too precisely, walls that aligned too cleanly, corners that seemed to draw attention. Buildings felt more rigid afterward, more assertive in their boundaries. As if they had learned how to insist on themselves. Megan began refusing to enter certain rooms. "Too finished," she would say. "It's easier for them to copy." She explained that the things she corrected did not move through space the way people did. They moved through definitions. They followed what was fixed, what was named, what had a purpose attached to it. That was why hikers vanished. Not because they were lost. Because they entered places where the landscape had not fully decided what it was yet. In those places, people were used to resolve uncertainty. On April 19th, Megan asked to be taken back to the fire tower. This time, the request was granted. A small team escorted her under the guise of a final structural assessment before demolition. Snow still clung to the shadows. The tower stood as it always had, tall, skeletal, patient. The ladder was there. Megan did not climb immediately. She stood at the base and listened. "They're close," she said, "but they can't finish it without me." When asked what she meant, she turned and met the lead investigator's eyes. "They don't know which version of me is correct," she said, "the one that stayed or the one that left." She climbed the ladder alone. No one followed. From below, the team heard nothing, no movement, no voice. Then the door closed. Not slammed. Settled. The lock slid into place. From the inside. Megan spoke once through the wood. "It needs a limit," she said. "I can still be that." The radio crackled, filled with brief static. And then the tower went silent. The fire tower did not open again. Search teams waited through the night, through dawn, through the slow creep of daylight across the ridgeline. Radios stayed clear. Instruments behaved normally for the first time in weeks. The mountains, for reasons no one could explain, felt stable. At sunrise, a decision was made. No forced entry. No demolition. No rescue attempt. The door remained locked from the inside, and everyone present understood, without anyone saying it, that opening it would undo whatever fragile balance had just been restored. Megan Holloway was listed as missing by noon. Not deceased. Not rescued. Missing. The official report stated that she had re-entered the fire tower voluntarily during an inspection and could not be located afterward. No further details were released. No press conference was held. The tower was quietly removed from all future plans. Not destroyed, preserved. In the weeks that followed, something changed across the San Juans. Disappearances stopped. Not declined. Not slowed. Stopped. Search and rescue teams reported the quietest season in decades. Trails behaved normally. Radios remained stable. Distance returned to its expected proportions. Even long-abandoned structures seemed less attentive. The mountains remembered how to be mountains again. Investigators monitoring the region noticed one final anomaly. At night, thermal imaging occasionally picked up a steady heat signature inside the fire tower, faint, constant, human-sized. It never moved. It never cooled. It did not register as life. It registered as presence. No one approached it. Megan Holloway's family was told she had saved herself once, and that this time she had chosen differently. They were given her belongings, carefully cleaned, carefully incomplete. One item was missing. The blanket. The one found with her in the tower. The tower kept it. Years later, a newly trained ranger would ask why that lookout still stood when others had been dismantled. An older ranger gave a simple answer. Because it's occupied. Nothing else was said. Hikers still pass beneath the ridgeline. Most never notice the tower above them, its windows dark, its door closed, its shape firm against the sky. But sometimes, on very clear days, people report the strange sensation of being seen, not watched, not judged, just acknowledged. As if the land itself were checking that they were still where they belonged. The fire tower does not call out. It does not open. It does not move. It simply holds. And as long as it does, the mountains remember where their edges are. And nothing else is asked to stay.